I'm Jessie Deeter, and my project is on Tunisia after the revolution. And my project began this summer in collaboration with Sarah Mamouri, my Tunisian-American colleague. And she found a man named Bassam Bouguera. She met him in the spring, and he was a Tunisian activist and blogger who'd been living and working in the States for 10 years and decided he had to go back to Tunisia once the revolution happened. He wanted to try and fight for democracy, meaning his job was to try to get out the vote and to try to get any independent parties to figure out politically how to organize and how to situate themselves specifically against the Nahda party, which is the main Islamic party, Tunisia's main opposition party against Ben Ali. Bassam and other modernists, as they call themselves, were working to provide an alternative to what they saw as a potential Islamic state. The other choice that Sarah and I made at the time last summer was to follow Jahra Atis, who represents exactly what Bassam fears, which is the Islamic party Nahda. Like Bassam, Jahra was a community organizer. She was working with youth. And then in a surprise move, Nahda, her party, put her up. They nominated her to run as a member of the Constituent Assembly. And she won in the elections in October. That means that Jahra is currently in the process of rewriting Tunisia's constitution. And when Sarah and I went back in January for the one-year anniversary of the revolution, we were able to follow her in the assembly making the rules, or not quite making the rules because the assembly was fighting over which language should be allowed in the assembly. But she's there and she's in the process of really remaking her country. So we're lucky enough to have these two perspectives, one modernist and one Islamic. And the modernist is a young man and the Islamist is a young woman of roughly the same age, going through roughly the same personal transitions, figuring out who they're going to marry, who they're going to be with. We're able to follow both the personal and the political in both of these characters' lives. And that's what's really exciting about the longer form documentary. For the NewsHour piece, Sarah and I focused on what it meant for Tunisia to be a country 1 year after the Arab Spring. This is the country that kicked off the Arab Spring just over a year ago. And we wanted to know, how are things doing? Were things better? Were things worse? Were people hopeful? And we found a combination of all of these things. We found people very hopeful, very happy to be able to speak in the streets to us, to openly to reporters, which they hadn't been allowed to do before. Not for years and years, they hadn't been allowed to speak. But we found that people were very angry. They felt that Nahda, the leading party, hadn't done really much of anything in the way of putting concrete reforms into place. In some places in Tunisia, unemployment is approaching 50%. So you have a huge population without work. Tourism has taken a huge hit because of the revolution. People are worried about the stability of the country. There are all these forces and all these changes. People want change very quickly, and then you have another set of voices saying it's far too soon to expect any sort of real change after so much dictatorship with the people who are just learning what it means to be a democracy. There are many questions being raised about what it means to be an Islamic state and a democracy. How are women's rights going to be maintained? How are freedoms of press and freedoms of speech going to be maintained? I think the jury is still out on all of these things, and I think it's going to be hard, and our reporting suggests that it's going to be a long, hard struggle.